For nearly 300,000 years, humanity learned. The usual story begins too late. It begins with fields, with villages, with walls, with cities. It begins when people have already changed the world so visibly that the evidence is impossible to miss. But by then, the deeper transformation has already happened. Before there were fields, someone had to imagine a place's future. Before there were villages, someone had to remember where return was possible. Before there were walls, stores, laws, and roads, the human mind had to learn something quieter. It had to learn that a place could matter even after people had left it. So perhaps the first question is not, why did humans settle down? Perhaps that question begins too late. A better question may be, what kind of mind could imagine return? For most of human history, survival did not mean staying. It meant moving, following animals, following water, following ripening plants, following seasons, following memory. Movement was not failure. It was wisdom. And for a very long time, wisdom meant knowing when to leave. But at some point, a different possibility began to form. Not all at once, not as a plan, not as the invention of civilization, but as a question, a quiet question, a revolutionary question. What if we came back? Every human life begins helpless. A child arrives knowing almost nothing of the world into which it has been born. It does not know where water hides in a dry season. It does not know which plant heals, which feeds, which poisons. It does not know how stone breaks. It does not know how animals move. It does not know which valley floods, which ridge protects, which path leads toward danger. If each generation had to begin again from nothing, humanity would have remained trapped near the beginning forever. The first great human problem was not how to build cities. It was how not to lose what one life had learned. Before writing, before schools, before libraries, before laws, human knowledge had to survive in bodies, in hands, in gestures, in memory, in repetition, in children watching before they understood. A tool is more than stone. It is a decision that outlives the moment. A hand guiding another hand is more than instruction. It is time passing from one body into another. A child watching an adult repair a spear, sort plants, tend fire, or read the sky is not merely watching work. The child is watching experience become inheritable. This was the first quiet victory, not mastery over nature, not control of the land, but continuity. Knowledge no longer had to die with the person who discovered it. A mistake could become a warning. A success could become a habit could become a tradition, and a tradition could become a starting point for someone not yet born. Before humanity could change the world, it had to learn how not to begin again. To modernize, a life of movement can look uncertain. Temporary camps, light possessions, paths without roads, places visited, then left behind. But this was not aimless wandering. Movement was a form of intelligence. It was a way of reading the world and answering it. When water failed, movement answered. When herds shifted, movement answered. When plants ripened elsewhere, movement answered. When danger gathered near a camp, movement answered. To move was to remain flexible. To remain flexible was to survive. The mobile mind had to notice everything. Tracks in damp soil, wind through grass, birds near water, the smell of rain, the silence before danger, the angle of light on a ridge, the memory of a place that had fed the group once before. Movement required knowledge, and that knowledge was not simple. It was ecological, seasonal, social, inherited. The people who moved through these landscapes were not people without place. They were people with many places, each known by season, each known by risk, each known by memory. A dry streambed was not only dry, it was water at another time. A valley was not only empty, it was a place where animals might pass. A ridge was not only stone, it was a line of sight, a shelter from wind, a warning before arrival. For most of the long human apprenticeship, the old answer worked. Move when the world demands movement. Carry what matters. Leave what cannot be carried. Remember enough to survive the return of seasons. Movement was wisdom. But one day, wisdom would have to change. Before there were drawn maps, there were remembered landscapes. A bend in a river. A stone on a ridge. A tree that marked a hidden spring. A dry channel that once carried water. A slope where animals crossed at dawn. A valley that looked empty to a child, but full of meaning to an elder. Memory turned land into pattern. It allowed the mind to hold what was not visible. Water that was not there now. Fruit that would ripen later. Danger that had once appeared from a place, now quiet. A path that could no longer be seen, but could still be followed. This was a powerful kind of knowledge. The land itself did not explain. It did not label its dangers. It did not mark its gifts. The human mind had to remember, and remembering changed what a place was. To one who had never been there, a valley was only terrain. To one who remembered, it was a story. Here the water lasted longer. There, the animals turned. Beyond that ridge, the wind changed. Near those stones, someone once found food when the group was hungry. In this way, memory became the first map. Not a map held in the hand, a map carried in the body, in footsteps, in gestures, in stories told by firelight, in the eyes of a child following where an elder points. And slowly, something important began. A place could be absent and still remain present in the mind. A place could be left and still matter. A place could be remembered before it was seen again. The birth of home does not begin with walls. It begins when the land carries memory. Memory allows the mind to hold the past. Planning allows it to reach toward what has not yet happened. To repair a spear before the hunt is to live slightly ahead of the moment. To prepare fire before night is to answer darkness before it arrives. To read the weather before danger is to treat the future as something that can be met. To choose a route before hunger becomes desperation is to survive in imagination before surviving in fact. Planning is one of the great invisible revolutions. It leaves small traces. A tightened cord, a sharpened edge, a basket repaired before gathering, a child told to wait, a hunter holding still before the animal appears, a hearth covered before departure, a useful tool placed where it may be found again. At first, planning serves immediate survival. The next hunt, the next storm, the next night, the next crossing. But once a mind can prepare for what is not yet present, the future begins to widen. Not just the next hour, not just the next day, perhaps the next season, perhaps the next return. This changes the meaning of things. A heavy stone is only a burden if the future is elsewhere. But if return can be imagined, weight begins to change. A thing too heavy to carry may still be worth keeping. A hearth may be more than yesterday's fire. A tool left behind may be more than loss. It may be a promise made to a future self. The mind that plans begins to live in more than one time. It stands in the present. It remembers the past. And it prepares a world that has not yet arrived. No human mind survived alone. The long apprenticeship was not carried by isolated individuals. It was carried by groups, by attention shared, by tasks divided, by warnings trusted, by food passed from one hand to another, by people learning not only the landscape, but one another. A hunt requires more than courage. It requires timing, patience, signals, trust in someone you cannot see, the ability to hold a shared plan in many separate bodies. One person waits, another moves, another watches the wind, another reads the animal. The success belongs not to one mind, but to a pattern between minds. Camp life required the same intelligence. Who eats first? Who waits? Who repairs the tool? Who watches the child? Who remembers the route? Who calms anger before it breaks the group? Cooperation is not a soft idea. It is a survival technology. But cooperation is never simple. Food can unite. Food can also divide. A tool can be shared. A tool can also be missed. A memory can guide. A memory can also accuse. Human beings had to learn how to survive nature. But they also had to learn how to survive one another. Around fire, children watched more than skills. They watched fairness, restraint, anger held back, generosity offered, silence used to keep peace, a hand raised not to command, but to calm. Before laws were written, social life was already teaching. Before courts, there were elders. Before contracts, there was memory. Before institutions, there was the fragile work of remaining together. The human mind was becoming larger than one skull. It was becoming a shared field of attention, a living network of memory, skill, trust, and repair. A child can learn from a parent, but a grandparent changes the scale of time. An elder remembers what a child never saw. A dry river with water in it, a valley before fire passed through, a season when food failed, a plant that saved lives, a place where danger came from the wrong direction. With elders, the living group contains more time than one generation can experience. This is not a small advantage. It allows knowledge to cross the boundary of a single life. The child does not have to wait for every mistake, does not have to test every poisonous plant, does not have to discover every dangerous crossing, does not have to learn every valley by hunger. Someone remembers. Someone points. Someone says, in gesture or story, "Not there. Not now. Wait. Remember this place." Before writing, elders were archives, not perfect archives. Around firelight, a place could exist before arrival. A child could learn of a spring in darkness, could hear of a valley while sitting far away, could imagine a path before walking it, could carry a memory that was not originally theirs. That is one of the deepest forms of inheritance, to remember what you did not live. To avoid a danger because someone else survived it. To recognize a place because an elder placed it inside your mind before your eyes ever found it. In the long apprenticeship, the old did not merely grow weaker. They made the group older than its youngest members. They gave the future a longer memory. Knowledge survives only if it can be transferred. And in the world before writing, teaching rarely looked like formal teaching. It was ordinary life. Hands guiding hands. A grip corrected. A plant separated from another nearly like it. A child stopped before reaching. A young hunter trying again. A stoneworker pausing before the next strike. Apprenticeship is the bridge between discovery and inheritance. Without teaching, an invention dies as soon as the inventor dies. With teaching, a useful action can become a tradition, and with tradition, the next generation does not begin at the beginning. Failure was part of this. A stone breaks badly. A spear point slips. A plant is misread. A route is chosen too late. But in a teaching culture, failure does not disappear. It becomes visible. It becomes correctable. It becomes part of what the next attempt knows. This is how knowledge becomes cumulative, not by perfection, by repetition, correction, imitation, memory, patience, by watching someone else's mistake and not needing to repeat it. Children learned before they could explain what they were learning. They learned through rhythm, through posture, through the feel of fiber twisting between fingers, through the sound of stone struck at the wrong angle, through the smell of plants, through the silence of adults waiting for the right moment. Culture entered the body before it became an idea. And once that happened, humanity was no longer only adapting through flesh and bone. It was adapting through teaching, through shared memory, through accumulated skill. Humanity was not only learning how to live, it was learning how to keep learning. A group can live for generations, believing that its way is simply the way to shape a tool, the way to prepare a plant, the way to divide food, the way to remember a valley, the way to move, the way to return. But when groups meet, the mind encounters alternatives. Another basket is woven differently. Another tool cuts in an unfamiliar way. Another person remembers the same valley by another feature. Another hunter holds a spear with a different grip. Another elder tells a story that does not match the one a child already knows. Contact does not need to be peaceful to be transformative. It does not need to become trade. It does not need to become friendship. Even cautious contact can widen thought. Because comparison weakens inevitability, it teaches the mind that always is not the same as must. Some new techniques fail. Some are misunderstood. Some are tried badly and abandoned. Some return later. Some become questions. Failure is not the opposite of knowledge. Failure is one of the ways knowledge is earned. An unfamiliar object in a child's hand is more than an object. It is evidence that the world can be done differently. A strange tool is not just a tool. It is a crack in certainty. Another method is not only useful, it is proof that habit is not destiny. Ideas, like plants, need environments. They need contact, variation, memory, curiosity, time. They need minds prepared to notice that another way exists. Before return could become a new answer, the human mind had to become capable of imagining alternatives. Not only, this is how we live, but could it be otherwise? The mind was changing, but the world was changing too. Climates shifted, seasons altered, water moved differently through valleys, plants gathered in thicker stands, wild grains ripened in places where memory could find them again. Animals followed corridors that could be watched, remembered, and anticipated. The landscape did not become tame. But in some places, it became more predictable, more generous, more worth remembering. This is important. Agriculture did not begin simply because plants existed. Wild grains had existed before, water had existed before, animals had migrated before. A resource is not yet a revolution. A landscape can offer possibility, but only a prepared mind can see it. By now, human beings had memory. They had planning. They had cooperation. They had teaching. They had elders. They had comparison. They had the ability to carry a place in the mind across absence. And so a rich valley was no longer only a place to pass through. It could become a pattern. Water here, grain there, animals beyond that slope, shelter near those stones, fire in this open ground, a path down from the ridge. Abundance created a new problem. There could be more grain than a basket could carry, more usefulness than a moving group could take, more value in a place than one visit could exhaust. The old answer still mattered. Move, follow, adapt, leave. But now the world had begun to ask a new kind of question. If this place gives more than we can carry, if this water returns, if these plants ripen again, if animals pass through here season after season, then what kind of place is this? The landscape had become an invitation. Not to settle yet, not to farm yet, but to remember differently. The old answer was not wrong. Movement had carried humanity through immense time. It had kept people alive through scarcity, danger, cold, and change. To move was still wise. To leave was still necessary. No single place could be trusted forever. But now, in certain landscapes, movement met a new tension. What should be done with a place that is too useful to forget? The group can fill baskets and still leave food standing. It can use a heavy stone and know it cannot carry it far. It can make a hearth, warm the night, and then cover the ashes before leaving. It can place a tool beneath a ledge and walk away. These are small actions, almost invisible, but they change the meaning of departure. Leaving no longer has to mean letting go completely. Absence no longer has to mean forgetting. A thing left behind may become part of a future plan. A path may remain because feet will return. A hearth may wait. A tool may wait. A valley may wait inside memory. This is not settlement. The group still moves. The old answer still lives. But it has begun to bend. Movement is no longer only escape, search, and adaptation. Movement can now contain return. A child looking back may not fully understand this. The child may only see that something useful is being left. A stone, a hearth, a tool, a place. But the adults are teaching, even in departure. They are teaching that the future is not only ahead. Sometimes, the future is behind you, waiting for memory to find it again. The question does not arrive as a speech. It does not arrive as a declaration. It arrives as recognition. A ridge appears. A valley opens below. A child sees what an elder once described. The spring, the grain, the path, the stones. The place is not new. It has survived absence. The group descends. The old hearth is found. Ash-darkened stones remain. A hand reaches beneath the ledge. The hidden tool is still there. A heavy stone waits near the place where it was left. Smoke rises again from the same ground. Nothing here is civilization. There are no walls, no fields, no houses, no written names, no boundary markers. But something essential has happened. A place has become part of a human future. This is the revolutionary act. Not staying forever, not yet. But imagining that absence can be crossed. That memory can attach a future to land. That what is left behind is not always lost. That a place can be prepared for return. Before people could settle, they had to think this way. Before they could build, they had to return. Before they could return, they had to remember. Before they could remember, they had to learn from the long apprenticeship of movement. The old question had been, where must we go next? Now another question could stand beside it. What if we came back? Sometimes, to survive change, we must remember where to return. A question becomes historical when it leaves a trace. Return leaves traces. A hearth used again. A path made clearer by repeated feet. A tool hidden, recovered, and hidden again. A heavy stone left in place because carrying it no longer makes sense. a patch of wild grain gathered with restraint, a spring remembered not only as water, but as meeting place. These are not villages. They are not farms. They are not permanent settlements. They are seasonal places. Places visited, left, remembered, and visited again. A seasonal place is a new kind of answer. It does not reject movement. It organizes movement. It says, we go elsewhere, but this place remains part of the pattern. In such places, memory begins to move outside the body. Not into writing, not yet. Into hearthstones, into paths, into hidden tools, into worn surfaces, into the expectation that others may also remember. And when more than one group returns, a place becomes more than useful. It becomes social. A knot in the landscape, a place of exchange, a place of caution, a place where children see strangers, a place where techniques, stories, foods, tensions, and questions gather. The first visible answers to return were humble. They did not announce themselves as history. They were not monuments. They were not foundations. They were repeated acts. Come back, use again, leave something, remember, return. If we can come back to a place, what else can remain? Every answer changes the world, and the changed world asks a harder question. Return gives meaning to place, but meaning is not weightless. A place remembered by one group may also be remembered by another. A spring that saved lives can become a spring where people must wait. A grain patch that fed children can become a place where restraint is required. A tool left for return can be found missing. A hearth remembered as ours may have been used by others. Belonging begins as a gift, but it quickly becomes responsibility. No one has written a law. No one has drawn a boundary. No one owns the valley in any formal sense. But memory is already doing social work. People remember who shared, who waited, who took too much, who helped repair shelter, who kept a promise, who did not. A place that remembers people can also remember conflict, not war, not conquest, not yet. Something quieter. A pause at the spring, a glance across a fire, a hand stopped before taking more grain, an elder calming a young hunter before accusation becomes action, a child watching adults learn that return requires restraint. The same memory that preserves wisdom can preserve injury. A valley can hold gratitude. It can also hold suspicion. A path can lead people back together. It can also bring them back to unresolved tension. And sometimes the place itself fails. The spring is lower than memory promised. The grain is thinner. The valley that once gave abundance now gives uncertainty. Then return must not become a trap. The old wisdom must remain alive. Move, adapt, leave when leaving is necessary. This is the trade-off. To belong is to gain a future in a place, but it is also to owe something to that place and to the people who remember it too. Belonging asks people to share, to wait, to leave enough, to forgive carefully, to remember responsibly, and sometimes to leave again. If we return, how must we live with what we have remembered? At the end of the long apprenticeship, nothing appears suddenly complete. There is no city, no field, no wall, no written law, no king, no monument announcing a new age. The old answer is still alive. The group must move. Food elsewhere will ripen. Animals elsewhere will pass. Water elsewhere will call. Danger elsewhere will require distance. To live is still to move. But now, movement carries more than bodies. It carries memory. It carries expectation. It carries responsibility. It carries a place inside the mind. Inheritance is not only what is given, it is what is noticed, what is repeated, what is carried forward without yet being fully understood. A child inherits tools, but also the reason tools are shaped this way. A child inherits paths, but also the memory of where paths lead. A child inherits stories, but also the silences inside them. A child inherits belonging, but also the cost of belonging. The place has gathered them. The place has taught them. The place has burdened them. And now the place must be left. To leave is not to erase. To leave is not to forget. To leave is not always to abandon. Sometimes to leave is to trust memory. The traces left behind are not ruins. They are not property. They are not architecture. They are memory given a place to rest. The child looks back, not as an owner, not as a farmer, not as a citizen of a village, but as someone who knows the place can matter again. That is the inheritance, not land possessed, land remembered, not a future controlled, a future imagined, not civilization yet, the thought that makes civilization possible. What has the child inherited? A tool? Yes. A story? Yes. A path? Yes. But deeper than all of these, the child has inherited a relationship with time, a past that can be remembered, a future that can be imagined, and a present that can choose between them. This is not a small thing. For most of life on Earth, the future is near. The next hunger, the next danger, the next season. But the human mind was learning to stretch the future across absence, across departure, across memory, across return. This is how history begins, before it is written. Not as dates, not as names, not as records, but as repeated meaning, a place returned to, a lesson repeated, a story retold, a path walked again, a question carried forward. The child has not invented agriculture, has not founded a village, has not written a law, has not claimed the land. But the child has learned to see a place as part of tomorrow. That is enough to change history. Because once a place can belong to the future, everything else becomes thinkable, staying, storing, marking, claiming, defending, sharing, remembering, returning, and eventually transforming the world. But not yet, not in this episode. Here, the important thing is quieter, older than fields, older than walls, older than writing, older than the word civilization itself. The ability to carry a place forward in the mind. The place is behind them and ahead of them. That is the strange power of return. It changes absence into connection. It changes memory into direction. It changes land into future. And so the first episode ends not with a city, not with a farm, not with people staying forever, but with a child who looks back, a child who has inherited the past and is learning to imagine a place as part of the future. What if civilization began not when humans stayed forever, but when they first learned to see a place as part of their future?